Hello. Last time we made a start on the subject of the environment, and we looked at the paradigm that governs our thinking. And it's a scientific, technological paradigm that was put in place about half a millennium ago with changes in philosophy, first of all, because they direct changes in the other disciplines like science. From science you get technological development. We mentioned how the early modern scientists and philosophers like René Descartes and Isaac Newton, to name two of the prominent influences, helped to establish a paradigm which is not the optimal paradigm for understanding our relationship with the environment and providing a basis for us to act with environmental awareness. We mentioned that Descartes really brought about a dualistic way of thinking, a dualism between the body and the mind, between spirit and matter, between man and nature. We also mentioned that Newton's universe made every object or body within that universe only actuated, moved by an external force, so that a body would stay in its state of rest or inertia unless some external force acted upon it. And hand in hand with this Newtonian universe went a new philosophical outlook which had a profound influence on the European Enlightenment and hence on Western development and the whole modern world. And that philosophical outlook was called deism. And in that, the force that set the universe in motion, for some it was the Creator. And originally in deism it was the Creator. The Creator wasn't given a place within the creation intimately, but only outside. So like a great engineer or clockmaker or computer programmer, he stayed outside the system and acted upon the system, and he cranked up the system in the beginning and then left it alone. So the way the system was is at time equals zero, what we would call the Big Bang today, the singularity. The system had no influence from spirit. It would just run on its own laws, the laws of nature, which were mechanical in their operation. They were immutable. And it's with these ideas that we moderns have attempted to understand and come to grips with the world. And part of the legacy of that is a kind of dominion approach to the natural world, in thinking that we stand outside nature, we're separate from nature, and we can act on it to our own advantage. We see ourselves as the great mechanics and technocrats that can manipulate everything. We can even manipulate the gene code. We may be able to manipulate the atmosphere. Ultimately, we'll get ourselves to other planets and colonize. So, man versus nature. Now, in the world of ecology, this philosophical position, this position of environmental philosophy, is known as anthropocentrism, man-centred, anthropos, Greek word meaning man. But it's not the only position. There's also biocentrism, because over time we've realised that we need to take into consideration the health and well-being of other life forms, not just ourselves. It's not just centred on ourselves. And then there's ecocentrism, which is the most comprehensive environmental philosophy that we moderns have developed. It's not to say that there aren't ancient precursors, but we're recovering this kind of worldview in the last century. And in that ecocentric worldview, we have to look at take a holistic look at the planet and its ecology, and realise that we are one with the planet, and that any action that we take on the planet is going to affect us. Another scientific precursor, going back, as I say, about 500 years, which just changed the way we view things, would have been the Copernican revolution, the heliocentric revolution. Before that, the medieval worldview had the planet Earth at the centre of the cosmos, and other planets, including the sun and the moon, orbited around the Earth in their respective shells or zones, and the fixed stars revolved around the periphery at the limit of our awareness. Now, some people believe, most people, they just assume, they take it for granted, and science has been telling us for a long time, that the heliocentric view, pioneered by people like Galileo and Copernicus, it completely supplanted the geocentric view of the cosmos, the Earth-centred, Geo-Earth-centred view of the cosmos. In one sense, that's right, because it has become the dominant modern paradigm. But in a deeper sense, if we're to be completely honest with ourselves, in the light of the understanding of relativity that Einstein gave, quantum mechanics, and the whole tenor and trajectory of science, physics in the 20th century, it must be said that these are two possible alternative ways of viewing the cosmos. There's actually nothing wrong with viewing the cosmos geocentrically. And it doesn't mean that a person who holds to that is superstitious, backward and medieval minded, because it's actually a consequence of Einstein's theory of relativity, the general theory of relativity anyway, that everything moves relative to everything else, and that it depends upon what you take as your point of reference. You can take the sun as a point of reference. You could take the earth as a point of reference. And you can map a cosmos based on the earth as a point of reference. Which is actually moving around which, you can't say with absolute certainty, because of the principle of relativity, and because some of the consequences of the theory of general relativity. It's worth a look at. You don't have to take my word for it, but those who understand the consequences of relativity and the theory that bears its name realise that we cannot say with absolute certainty that this is moving around that. Both models can serve at different points. the geocentric model is still useful in some situations, and the heliocentric model is used in most situations. Now, why is it so significant? Well, because it creates a shift in the human imagination and culture to see us as some speck in the outer suburbs of some galaxy orbiting a star, which is not special at all. It's just one star among many, and not one of the largest or most brilliant stars. It's middling in size. But we go around that along with the planets, and that star orbits the Milky Way galaxy. And that galaxy is just one of billions of far-flung galaxies which cluster together in groups and various aggregations in a vast universe. So we're just a speck, and consequently we're insignificant. Now compare that view of human beings as insignificant, which goes hand in hand with a Newtonian universe, because in a Newtonian universe, space is an absolute, time is an absolute. Doesn't explain why, but the bodies move within that absolute framework. Well, the Newtonian universe has been superseded by an Einsteinian universe in which space and time are not absolute. Now compare that idea of us on planet Earth just as a speck floating in the infinite cosmos. The universe doesn't care whether we survive or die or perish. We don't know if there are other points of evolved life in this far-flung universe or not. Compare that with the geocentric view, which places us at the very centre of the known universe. Everything going around us. Suddenly, we're very special. And our planet is very precious. And there's some kind of sacred significance to us being in this spot. In fact, you could imagine that we are in the apple of God's eye, the apple of God's eye. We've been put here for a reason. So if it helps to use the geocentric view to realise that life is not meaningless and it is precious and sacred, and this earth of ours is special and sacred, it's certainly worth freeing ourselves from the straitjacket of the Copernican heliocentric universe. Yes, as a model, and yes, for instrumental purposes. Because when the medieval church came into its controversy with Galileo, its insistence was that this theory of the heliocentric universe is only to be put forward as a theory, not as the absolute truth. And I think that if we use it as a theory, as something that can be instrumentalized to explain certain things and so on, but are not wedded to it, it might help with our worldview and paradigm. So we've got all these ingredients. We've got ingredients from philosophers like Descartes and scientists like Newton and scientists like Boyle, who kind of revived the atomic theory, matter being broken up into indivisible little bits as the basis of everything. And then we've also got that astronomical, cosmological input, that revolution in our thinking, which put the Earth not at the centre, but nowhere in particular that's significant. If our position is significant, we're more likely to value it and take care of it. The school of philosophical ecology that deals with, well, there are several perspectives. We mentioned the anthropocentric and the biocentric and the ecocentric, which last one has become the basis of modern environmentalism. But there are also radical ways of understanding ecology, each of which has a value in its turn and in its place. And we need to be able to understand what they're about a bit and take some inspiration from them. One is deep ecology, which looks at the intrinsic, inherent worth of every organism, not just ourselves. Another one is social ecology, which draws a link between the problems that we face with the environment and the social problems that we face. Should we just be looking at environmentalism cut off from political economy? Or do the problems that we face in political economy find a reflection in the problems, in the ecological problems that we face? And the school of social ecologists believe that they do. That, for example, the economic system that we work under is exploitative. And it's unfair to a lot of people. Therefore, it is bound not to do the right thing by the environment. It's bound to exploit the environment in an unsustainable way, exhaust it, derange its ecosystems, lead to a loss of biodiversity and so on. The current pontiff, Francis, has got a reputation as an environmentalist pope, really perhaps the first environmentalist pope. Took his name up from Francis of Assisi, who's the patron saint of environmentalism. And in his encyclical Laudato Si, he talks about not two problems to solve, the social and the environmental, but one integrated, complex problem to resolve, that there must be social justice as well as environmental justice, and the two go together. So it seemed to me that there's a great resonance between the attitudes that we find in Laudato Si and the principles of the social ecologists. There's another profound ecological perspective known as ecofeminism. And this gives us another wrinkle in the picture, in the sense that our inability to respect and value the feminine energy, feminine things, women, and there's a lot in the news at the moment about gendered violence. So the fact that we don't treat the feminine well is reflected in the way we abuse nature. So if we had a healthier attitude towards the feminine, and a lot of the ecofeminists talk about a damaging patriarchy. Now they use the term patriarchy pejoratively. It may not be the best term to use because it precludes the possibility of a positive notion of patriarchy. Nevertheless, let's try to understand what they're getting at. There seems to be a derangement between the male and the female energies, and we've talked about this before. We're talking about sex, marriage, family, the creative impulse in us versus the receptive impulse in us. We are meant to regard these two energies as complementary and in harmony, the male and the female. And when they get out of kilter, the female energy can become dominable, the male energy can become dominant, aggressive, repressive, oppressive, exploitative. So there are some commonalities here between ecofeminism and social ecology. And it's only when we can correct the balance of energies within ourselves. What does that look like? Well, if you're a male, it would look like balancing your male and female energies. Now, of course, I'm not talking about being binary, or I'm not talking about flipping between genders. I'm talking about a spiritual or metaphysical hermaphroditism. In a sense, we are hermaphrodite because every man has an interior female and every female has an interior male. Or that may be described as a bevy of masculine principles. Psychology bears this out as well. In Jungian psychology, for example, in a man, the conscious self is considered masculine. The unconscious is called the anima, which is a feminine ending, a. It is sometimes known as the muse, and it's the inspiration for the man, but it has a feminine quality to it. And in order to become whole and integrated as a human being, you must have a relationship with that anima if you're a man. In the case of the woman, your conscious self is feminine, but your spiritual self, your unconscious, has a masculine quality to it, a kind of polyvalent masculinity to it, which the woman needs to integrate with her conscious self in order to be whole. And ancient philosophies and traditions have recorded this and enshrined it in different ways. One example is in China, they talk about the Tao, which is the way. It's the basic creative force of the universe. But the Tao, if you picture the symbol, is a relationship of yin and yang, and they are in harmony. the white yang in the circle and the black yin. And in the white section, there's a spot of black. And in the black section, there's a spot of white. In other words, they can't be fully separated. There's a bit of yin in the yang and some yang in the yin because they are interconnected. It's a bit like Eve being taken out of Adam's rib. They are connected, man and woman. They're meant to be complementary and live in harmony with each other. Anyway, these ideas are some more of the foundation for our new paradigm. We'll take up on this soon.